The recent events in Rafah, a Palestinian city tragically familiar with conflict, have sent shockwaves across the globe. The images, stark and heart-wrenching, are impossible to ignore. They serve as a grim reminder of the human cost of a conflict that has spanned decades. This latest eruption of violence has ignited a firestorm of international condemnation, prompting many to ask, could this be a turning point for Palestine? The sheer scale of the recent violence is deeply troubling. It underscores the urgent need for a just and lasting solution to this protracted conflict. The international community can no longer stand idly by while innocent lives are lost and a people's right to self-determination is denied. The question is no longer whether to act, but how. Several European nations, including Spain, Ireland and Norway, have signalled a potential shift in the geopolitical landscape. These countries have taken significant steps towards recognising a Palestinian state, a move that could have far-reaching implications. Their actions, while largely symbolic, carry significant weight, potentially paving the way for other nations to follow suit. The international community must seize this opportunity to break the cycle of violence and work towards a future where Palestinians and Israelis can coexist in peace and security. The path ahead will undoubtedly be challenging, but the alternative, continued bloodshed and suffering, is simply unacceptable. The international response to the Rafah crisis has been swift and unequivocal in its condemnation of the violence. Governments and international organizations alike have issued strong statements expressing their outrage and calling for an immediate ceasefire. However, beyond the rhetoric, there is a growing sense that words are not enough. The calls for concrete action are getting louder, particularly regarding the recognition of a Palestinian state. For decades, the international community has been locked in a stalemate, with the two-state solution seemingly slipping further out of reach. The recent events in Rafah have injected a sense of urgency into the debate, prompting some countries to reconsider their long-standing positions. Spain, Ireland and Norway have emerged as key players in this evolving diplomatic landscape. They have long been vocal advocates for Palestinian rights, consistently calling for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Their recent moves towards recognizing a Palestinian state signal a potential turning point in the international approach to the issue. While the impact of these actions remains to be seen, they represent a significant departure from the status quo. They challenge the existing power dynamics and could embolden other nations to follow suit, potentially shifting the balance in favor of Palestinian statehood. Spain's historical ties to the Arab world run deep, and its relationship with Palestine is no exception. Spain has consistently supported the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, advocating for a peaceful resolution based on a two-state solution. In recent years, Spain has taken concrete steps to strengthen its ties with Palestine, including opening a representative office in Ramallah. The Spanish government's recent announcement that it is considering recognizing a Palestinian state is a significant development. It reflects a growing sentiment within Spain that the status quo is untenable and that bolder action is needed. This move has been met with mixed reactions, with some praising Spain's leadership while others urge caution. Supporters argue that recognizing a Palestinian state is a moral imperative, a recognition of the Palestinian people's inalienable rights. They believe that it could help break the deadlock in the peace process and pave the way for a more just and equitable future. Opponents, however, express concerns that such a move could escalate tensions and further complicate efforts to reach a negotiated settlement. They argue that recognition should be part of a broader diplomatic strategy, not a unilateral action. Ireland's steadfast support for Palestinian self-determination is deeply rooted in its own history of struggle against colonial rule. The Irish people understand the yearning for freedom and the right to determine their own destiny. This empathy has shaped Ireland's foreign policy, making it a vocal advocate for Palestinian rights on the international stage. Ireland has consistently condemned Israeli settlements in the occupied territories, viewing them as illegal under international law and a major obstacle to peace. The Irish government has also been critical of Israel's blockade of Gaza, calling for an end to the humanitarian crisis there. In recent years, Ireland has taken concrete steps to elevate its relationship with Palestine, including upgrading its diplomatic mission in Ramallah to a full embassy. This move was widely seen as a symbolic act of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Ireland's parliament has passed a motion calling on the government to formally recognise a Palestinian state. While the government has yet to take this step, it has indicated that it is actively considering it. Such a move would be a historic one, potentially influencing other European nations to follow suit. Norway has a long and distinguished history of involvement in Middle East peace efforts. Its role as a facilitator in the Oslo Accords in the 1990s cemented its reputation as a neutral and trusted broker. While the Oslo process ultimately fell short of its goals, Norway's commitment to peace in the region remains unwavering. Norway has been a strong supporter of Palestinian statehood, consistently voting in favour of resolutions upholding Palestinian rights at the United Nations. It has also been a major donor to Palestinian development projects, providing humanitarian assistance and supporting economic growth. The Norwegian government has expressed its willingness to recognise a Palestinian state at an appropriate time, contingent upon progress in the peace process. While it has not yet taken this step, it remains a vocal advocate for a two-state solution based on international law. Norway's principled stance on Palestine is rooted in its commitment to international law and human rights. It believes that a just and lasting peace can only be achieved through a negotiated settlement that recognises the legitimate aspirations of both Palestinians and Israelis. The recent events in Rafah and the subsequent moves by Spain, Ireland and Norway towards recognising a Palestinian state signal a potential shift in the international approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For decades, the United States has been the dominant player in the region, often acting as a shield for Israel in international forums. However, the growing consensus that the status quo is unsustainable, coupled with the changing geopolitical landscape, has created an opportunity for other actors to emerge. The European Union, in particular, has been increasingly vocal in its criticism of Israeli policies and its support for Palestinian rights. The recognition of a Palestinian state by a critical mass of countries could have significant implications. It would challenge the legitimacy of Israel's occupation and potentially expose it to greater international pressure. It could also pave the way for Palestine to join international organizations and participate more fully in world affairs. However, it is important to note that recognition alone will not bring about peace. It must be accompanied by concrete measures to address the underlying issues driving the conflict, including the occupation, settlements, and the status of Jerusalem. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, raised hopes for a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The agreement, brokered with Norway's help, envisioned a two-state solution based on mutual recognition and a phased withdrawal of Israeli forces from occupied territories. However, the Oslo process ultimately unravelled, leaving behind a legacy of broken promises and shattered dreams. The expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, continued violence, and a lack of trust between the two sides undermined the agreement. The Second Intifada, which erupted in 2000, further dimmed hopes for a negotiated settlement. The Oslo Accords, while flawed, remain a significant milestone in the history of the conflict. They demonstrated that a negotiated settlement is possible, even if the path to achieving it remains elusive. The lessons learned from Oslo are crucial for any future peace efforts. The international community must learn from the mistakes of the past and approach future negotiations with greater resolve and a clear understanding of the obstacles that lie ahead. A lasting peace can only be built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and a commitment to finding a just solution for both Palestinians and Israelis. The two-state solution, once seen as the most viable path to resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is increasingly being questioned. The relentless expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank has eroded the territorial contiguity necessary for a viable Palestinian state. The situation in Gaza, under blockade and plagued by humanitarian crises, further complicates matters. The two-state solution, as originally envisioned, may no longer be feasible. The reality on the ground has changed dramatically since the Oslo Accords, making it increasingly difficult to envision two states coexisting peacefully. The international community must grapple with this uncomfortable truth and explore alternative solutions. One such alternative is a single binational state where Israelis and Palestinians have equal rights and representation. While this idea has gained traction in recent years, it faces significant challenges. It would require a fundamental shift in the political discourse on both sides and a willingness to embrace a shared future. The international community must remain open to all viable solutions that ensure the rights and security of both Palestinians and Israelis. The status quo is unsustainable and will only lead to further suffering and instability. Public opinion can be a powerful force for change, even in seemingly intractable conflicts. The global outcry over the recent events in Rafah demonstrates the growing awareness of the Palestinian plight and the desire for a just solution. Social media, in particular, has played a crucial role in amplifying Palestinian voices and mobilizing support around the world. The boycott, divestment and sanctions (BDS) movement, for example, has gained significant traction in recent years. Inspired by the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, the movement seeks to pressure Israel economically and politically to comply with international law. While the impact of BDS on the Israeli economy is debatable, its symbolic power is undeniable. It has helped to shift the discourse on Israel-Palestine, challenging the narrative that Israel is a victim and highlighting its role as an occupying power. The growing global solidarity with Palestine is putting pressure on governments to take concrete action. As public awareness of the injustices faced by Palestinians grows, so too does the political cost of inaction. Achieving a just and lasting peace in the Middle East requires addressing the issue of accountability for past wrongs. Both Palestinians and Israelis have suffered greatly during this protracted conflict, and acknowledging each other's pain is essential for reconciliation. The International Criminal Court's (ICC) decision to open an investigation into alleged war crimes committed in the Palestinian territories has been met with mixed reactions. Supporters see it as a step towards ending impunity and holding perpetrators accountable. Opponents argue that it is counterproductive and will only harden positions. Regardless of one's stance on the ICC's involvement, the pursuit of justice must be a central component of any peace process. This includes addressing the issue of settlements, which are considered illegal under international law, and ensuring that all those responsible for human rights violations are held accountable. Reconciliation cannot happen in a vacuum. It requires a genuine commitment from both sides to acknowledge the suffering of the other and to work together to build a shared future based on mutual respect and understanding. The future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains uncertain. The recent events in Rafah serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of the situation and the urgent need for a just and lasting solution. While the path ahead is fraught with challenges, there is still hope for a brighter future. The growing international consensus that the status quo is unsustainable, coupled with the increasing global awareness of the Palestinian plight, creates an opportunity for progress. The actions of countries like Spain, Ireland and Norway, while largely symbolic, demonstrate that the international community is no longer willing to accept the status quo. However, achieving a peaceful resolution will require a fundamental shift in the political discourse on both sides. It will require courageous leadership, a willingness to compromise, and a shared commitment to building a future where both Palestinians and Israelis can live in peace and security. The alternative, continued violence, suffering and instability, is simply unacceptable. The international community must remain engaged, using all diplomatic tools at its disposal to bring the two sides together and help them forge a path towards a just and lasting peace. The pursuit of peace in the Middle East is a collective responsibility. The international community, regional actors, and most importantly, Palestinians and Israelis themselves all have a role to play in ending this protracted conflict. The recent events in Rafah underscore the urgency of this task. The international community must move beyond condemnation and take concrete steps to hold all parties accountable to their obligations under international law. This includes ensuring that Israel ends its occupation of Palestinian territories, dismantling settlements and lifting the blockade of Gaza. Regional actors, particularly Arab states, have a crucial role to play in facilitating dialogue and confidence-building measures between Palestinians and Israelis. They can also provide economic and political support to help build a viable Palestinian state. Ultimately, however, the key to peace lies with Palestinians and Israelis themselves. They must find a way to move beyond the cycle of violence and mistrust that has plagued their relationship for decades. This will require courageous leadership, a willingness to compromise, and a shared vision for a future where both peoples can live in peace and security. The road to peace is long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be taken. The alternative, continued bloodshed and suffering, is simply unacceptable. The international community must stand united in its support for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, for the sake of both Palestinians and Israelis, and for the stability and security of the entire region.